great that you join.
Morning, Thijs. Yeah, I see some people are still joining in, so let's give it one more minute before we kick off.
Yes, and in the meantime, let me explain a little bit more on how we are going to approach this upcoming hour. From Webs, I am hosting this HubSpot user group session. Steven is joining from HubSpot as a customer success manager, so that's great. I see Klaartje already using the chat. That's exactly what we want to cheer for the upcoming hour, because everybody is muted. You can use the general chat function to ask all your questions, and I have the permission from Steven to interrupt him at certain points if the questions are so we can provide you with all the answers, I have to say. And in this way, we would like to make this as valuable as possible, because we have a great topic on the agenda. As you can see on the screen, it's the 29th webinar of Webs, but this is a special HUG edition and HubSpot user group edition. We are hosting a series of HubSpot related webinars, and today we have a user group edition, as I said. Steven is joining, like I said, as a customer success manager, and he is going to explain how to use the CRM data to its full potential with marketing automation and lead nurturing, because the companies who figured out customer experience the best are the winners of tomorrow, right, Steven?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many people that are just not using all their data optimally. And if there's one thing that I'm hoping to achieve today, is just get a few more people using some of their data a little bit more efficient. So let me just dive in. So hello everyone, my name's Steven. As Thijs has said, I'm a customer success manager. I work with about 150 clients in the Benelux. So I do direct strategic consulting sessions with these 150 clients to talk about a number of topics. But one of them amongst which is marketing automation, it's lead nurturing and making sure that you're using your data as efficiently, as effectively as possible. So today, what we're going to talk about is marketing automation. And I think if you look at marketing automation, it really ties into lead nurturing. I think you can't say marketing automation without lead nurturing, or lead nurturing without marketing automation. So we're just going to dive into what it is. We're going to look at different ways people are automating and different ways people are nurturing leads, but also about the timing. And I think the timing is so important because it's about sending the right message to the right people at the right time. We're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into, when we've done the theoretical part, how do you actually do this in practice? And we're also going to go over a couple of examples. So like I said, if you have any questions at any point, pop them in the chat. I'm happy to be interrupted. Let's start at the start. Lead nurturing is really all about building relationships, and it's about providing value. So if you put it as simply as possible, lead nurturing is a system that allows you to engage with an early stage in order to pre-qualify a lead before handing them over to your sales team. Why is it important? Well, companies that excel at lead nurturing, they generate 50% more sales at a 30% lower cost. So in most cases, only a small percentage of your inbound leads will be ready to make an immediate purchase, which leaves around 90% of your inbound leads on the table. Now, if you're not nurturing those leads that weren't ready to make a direct sale, you could be missing out on serious revenue opportunities. So I just want to make sure that we have a distinction between email blasts and lead nurturing. So what we have here is a screenshot from one of my colleagues, and this was around Valentine's Day. And this is a prime example of email blasts, right? So Valentine's Day comes up, we're not looking at anything else, we're just all sending out a massive amount of emails around Valentine's Day. This is not lead nurturing, this is an email blast. Lead nurturing is a connected series of useful emails with purpose and with relevant content. So it looks at who you are, where are you in a stage, instead of just saying everyone's receiving this bit of promotion that I'm doing without looking at anything else. There's a couple of fundamental truths of lead nurturing. I think it's really often misunderstood, but lead nurturing is not just about your company. Let me just make an example of, we all have that kind of friend that we invite for dinner and they talk about themselves pretty much all the time. And after a while, we also tone out because we can't hear someone talk about themselves only. It's the same way in lead nurturing. If all your emails are about who you are as a company, what you do and what you offer, you're not adding value. And I think that's really the main point of lead nurturing, is making sure that you do add that value. It shouldn't be a sales pitch. You want to make sure that you give the right information based on where people are in their journey. Most people, when they come to your website or when they come in contact with you, they're not ready for an immediate sales pitch. So if someone presses any kind of button and you just keep blasting them with sales emails, if they haven't responded to the first one, they're definitely not going to respond to any of the other ones. So how about we make sure that we know what they need and then we provide it to them before we even talk about anything of selling. Now, finally, lead nurturing is not an autopilot. So you can't set up your same 3 emails. Okay, here's the contact form. This is email 1, 2, and 3. Great, we've set this up in 2019 and we're still running the same thing. It doesn't work like that. You need to monitor and see, what are you doing? What's working? Are people still opening my emails? Is this still relevant? Is this information out of date? What you want to do is make sure that you're working in a customer-centric point of view. What does someone want when they reach a certain page, when they fill out a certain form, and how can we give that to them? Is it helpful? Before we ever ask anything, are we providing value? Are we giving them something? Are we giving them information? Are we giving them processes, worksheets, ebooks, guides, anything like that? Or are we just asking things? Are we asking for information? Are we asking for email addresses, phone numbers, etc.? Or are we maybe making sure that they trust us first before we ask for anything in return? And then finally, it should be improved all the time. We'll get back to this. Let's have a look at a couple of different ways to nurture leads. There are a ton of tools in HubSpot that you can use for your lead nurturing strategy. Today, we're mainly going to focus on the automated pieces. So we're not going to go through all of these, but of course, there's always webs to answer any kind of questions about tooling that we're not going to go over today. So email is probably the most common one when you're looking at lead nurturing, but there's tons of other tools that can play a really, really major part. We'll just dive into a few examples. And I think the first one that is so often neglected are smart CTAs. If someone's looking at your website and they see your first CTA, and I've just given you a HubSpot example here, so the free download for marketing strategy, templates, and guides. Well, if they've downloaded that piece of content, providing that same CTA is no longer relevant. Instead, we can think ahead and we can think, well, if they've downloaded a marketing strategy template and guide, that means that they're very likely to work on a marketing strategy. So how about we make sure that we have a smart CTA set, so when they revisit a certain page, we can offer them the next step and make sure that we're with them all the way through the journey and providing them with relevant content. This is a great thing that I think is also underutilized, is progressive profiling. It's really hard to get information from leads. We all know this. And it's even harder if you put everything in your first form that's going to be like 2 or 3 pages long. People are not going to fill out your form. So instead, what you can do when you guide people on this journey is make sure that you ask for information in return for every step on the way. So by using progressive profiling, we can get new information when someone downloads something new that we're offering. And as we know, information about our leads is really crucial for us to know who are they, where are they at in the journey, so what can we offer them at what time. If we're talking about automation, I think it would be remiss not to talk about A/B testing. A/B testing is probably the first thing that you think of when it comes to automation combined with workflows. A/B tests will guide you on what's performing well, but also on what could be performing better. So what I have here is just a quick example of an A/B test of an email, and you can help it determine which does best. There's a couple of different ways that you can use this. You can look at open rates or click rates, depending on what email you're sending and what's the most relevant metric. But this is a really good way to find out what's working for your leads in your group of clients. There's also, of course, pop-up forms, lead flows, and pop-up forms, as we all know, are a great way to capture attention. The content needs to be relevant. So you can use a sequence of follow-ups to develop more of that engagement. When you're looking at pop-ups, make sure that you're not just adding in 5 pop-ups on a page, because it's going to get very spammy. But if you have a relevant pop-up, maybe with an exit intent or a relevant offer based on the page that people are at, this is a great way to make sure that people convert. And last but not least, the usual top one choice for lead nurturing would be your email workflows. We'll look into workflows a bit more because it's a little bit more of a complex tool. But I really wanted to highlight all of these other tools because we shouldn't underestimate the power of the other tools that we've discussed so far. Any questions coming in so far, Thijs?
No, we're still good to go.
Perfect. Awesome. Let's have a look at when you're nurturing leads. And I think this is a really complex piece that is often overlooked. When you start nurturing leads is after they've done any kind of action. So this could be a first-time conversion. This could be a content offer download, a blog subscription, a trial or a demo. These are all different points in the journey. So we have a full journey that starts at the very first thing someone could do, the most far away from making the sale to the closest to making the sale. And we want to make sure that we look at where are they in this journey to make sure what are we sending them. We're going to go over a full timeline a little bit later on, but keep these points in mind, and these slides will be shared with you as well. So make sure that if you have any of these points, that you're setting up automation for that. A question I often get is, why are my leads unqualified? So you're getting people in, very often sales would be reaching out relatively quickly in this case, and they feel like they're not getting good leads. Well, there's a bunch of reasons why your leads may be unqualified. And there's a bunch of different solutions for working with this. If the company is too big or too small, well, maybe your solution is designed for SMBs, but you may be attracting a lot of enterprise leads. Well, think about this. You can't sell what you can't support. Think about your own matrix and think about what is a bad lead and talk to your sales team because they will know what a bad lead is. You're always going to get leads that are better or worse, but by making sure that we're qualifying and we're using kinds of lead scoring systems, which we can't fully go through today, but there's tons of great resources available online. By making sure that you have lead scoring in place, you can automate based on your lead scores as well. Another great solution to unqualified leads is filter. Filter. There needs to be a way to filter the hot from the cold. And you don't want to waste any more of your time with leads that are bound to fail. Because wasted time is wasted money. There's a lot of implementation of segmentation and lists. And I would really strongly urge that you use lists as much as possible for your segmentation and for your lead nurturing. What I want to do is go through brainstorming your workflow logic, because if we're thinking about marketing automation, workflows are the main thing that we're talking about. So this is what I want to spend the majority of the session on. And we're just going to go through different steps of the workflow. One thing that, again, is often overlooked is setting goals for workflows. It's really hard to define the success of a workflow if you're not sure what success means. I very often get the question, how could we improve our workflows? Well, one way to improve them is to make sure that you know what you're improving on. So every workflow should have a goal, ideally, especially if they're used for lead nurturing. Your goal should consider quite a few things. Who are you nurturing? What's the audience? What action would you like your audience to take? And this is very often what the goal is aimed around. When would you like to nurture them and for how long? Where are they in the buyer's journey? So what's the entry point of any given workflow and what's the exit point? Why will your contacts want to engage with the content in your email? Are you providing anything of use, or are you just sending emails for the sake of sending emails? How will you measure the success? So how are you going to report on the effectiveness of this workflow? And as well, is this goal attainable with one workflow, or should you be splitting up the goal that you have in mind over several workflows? If we look at workflows in the most basic form, this is essentially how a nurturing workflow works. You have an audience at A, and you are a few emails, tasks, follows, and you want to make sure that your lead gets to B. So to make it a little bit more concrete, someone's downloaded a kit, an ebook, a content offer, a worksheet. It doesn't really matter what you're offering. Someone has in some way engaged with you, and you want to make sure that they go from the very first step to a kind of follow-up activity. In this case, we're looking at people who've downloaded a certain kit, and we want to make sure to get them to the goal of registering for a webinar. A formal goal that you could tie to this is, I would like 15 contacts to sign up to my webinar. This is concrete. You can absolutely look back on this and say, well, this has failed or this has been a success. There's different kinds of workflows you can set up. So if we have a look at one of them, someone that looks at pricing information. Well, someone that looks at pricing information are usually a lot further in their process of decision making than someone that's downloaded your first content offer. So it would make sense from going to pricing information to requesting a consultation. You might want to check and see how many emails would this take. So this example is 4 emails, but it's going to be different based on your industry and based on the leads that you're nurturing. So this is as well one of those times where you want to experiment with your automation to make sure that you have the right workflow set up. There's not one best practice. It is really trial and error based on where you are at. There's different ways to use automation as well. So think about if you're doing any kind of renewal or if you can do any kind of upsell. I think if we have either an upsell or a renewal, we cover quite a lot of companies. Customers that are at a 1-year mark are very likely to be comfortable with whatever you're offering them. And this might be a really good time to look at either a renewal or an upsell possibility. Well, why not use a workflow to make sure that you're getting people ready for this? So let's take HubSpot as an example. If someone's purchased a HubSpot Professional a year ago, then by now I think, well, maybe they're starting to use most of their sales tools. Is their sales team growing? And if so, maybe they'd be ready for an upgrade or they'd be ready for more seats. So I want to make sure that we're sending out this relevant information around that time to make sure that they're aware that this exists and we're giving them information about how to grow your sales team, for example. Then one that happens is stale leads, especially if you're in B2B, there is such a thing as database TK. So people leave companies, email addresses get deactivated. So there's just a rough 5% of emails a month that are just no longer relevant, depending on the size and then how well you keep your database clean. But if you have stale leads that you've not engaged with in a while, it could be really worth it to see, can we re-engage those leads or is it time to say goodbye? If you have stale leads, this is a perfect example of setting up a workflow to see, can we re-engage them? And if we can't re-engage them, then perhaps it's time to clean them up so that we don't waste any further time or resources on these. But if we can re-engage them, that's great, because that means that someone that we already no longer thought of as a lead could be a lead again. One of the goals here could be clicking a link to a resource article. It could be a lot of different kind of goals for this one, depending on your company and your structure. Okay, there we go. So what you want to do ideally is take a look at the full length of a buyer's journey. And if this is something that you've not thought about before, this is a really good exercise for you to look at. What does my full journey look like? And if you just type in buyer's journey on Google with HubSpot, you will get a million articles, blogs, whatever, to help you set this up. But what I find that people do way too often is they go, okay, someone's downloaded the checklist, so that means they're probably ready to receive someone from sales reaching out for a pricing point or a consultation or anything like that. And then they find that a lot of people don't respond to those emails because people weren't ready for that email yet. You skipped a lot of steps, and these steps are not going to be the same for everyone. But I really, really recommend having a look at using milestones in your nurturing strategy so that you go from checklist to request a consultation and making sure that you have relevant goals in between. The great thing about setting your structure and your automation up like this is that you can measure the effectiveness of every single bit. If we make one large workflow that goes from a checklist to a consultation, it's going to be really hard to find where your leads are dropping off. If we're seeing that we have these milestones, we can measure the effectiveness of getting from milestone A to milestone B to milestone C. And that helps us get more insights in what part of our lead nurturing strategy is not as up to par as the other parts of our strategy.
Steven, maybe a good moment to pause here, because this is a great example using those milestones in order to measure what's working and what's not in terms of lead nurturing. Another best practice, the emails for getting people towards another milestone can be A/B tested. And there are two questions around A/B testing in the chat. One from Roel Miles. Hi, Steven. When A/B testing on emails, you are not able to use the time zone sending. Is that correct? And are there current plans within HubSpot to enable this going forward? Do you know anything about that?
That's a great question. I know I don't have a direct answer for you. I know that this is something that's being looked at because there's currently in our product development team, there's a lot of process around the A/B testing. So currently in beta is the A/B testing for workflows. So I'm not actually sure if the time zone sending will be contributed soon, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's being worked on. I'm afraid that's all I have in that regard.
Yeah. Okay. And from Hester, another question. Can you tell us about minimum quantities you should meet for using A/B testing in emails in order to get valuable insights?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It really depends on the amount of context that you're sending to as well. I would say that you probably want to have a minimum of about 50 contacts before you can make any kind of conclusions. The way that A/B testing in HubSpot works is that both versions are being sent out to a number of contacts, and then based on the initial data, it's going to automatically choose a winner. So if you go with too small of a group, your A/B test is going to be purely an A/B test, and it's going to maybe give you a little bit of useful information about what not to do in the future, but it won't have too much effect on that specific email send.
No, makes sense. Other questions in the chat, for example, the one from Frederick is answered by other users in the chat already. So feel free to share all your own experiences as well and make this a user group discussion. That's really valuable. Thank you for doing that. So Steven, we are 4 minutes before halfway time, I would say, so we're still good to go. Please continue, and I will interrupt you if we have some other questions coming up.
Amazing. Yeah, great questions. Keep them coming. If there's anything I can't answer now, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to look into certain things and get back to you if there's something that I can't really answer directly. As you understand, HubSpot is a really, really large tool, so it's hard to keep up to date with all the product developments at any given state, but I'm happy to follow up with any kind of questions. I just want to go back to that previous slide where we saw different kind of workflows. And if we look at your milestone setting, I think we were pretty much a long way there. We had different kind of workflows that were all aiming towards a certain goal, and that's your step one. Once you're there, we want to have a look at, well, how do we tie these workflows together so that we get into a full journey? If we look at that here, contacts who downloaded the kits are being nurtured to register to a webinar. If someone's registered to a webinar, you want to make sure that you're sending kind of follow-up information to make sure that people actually attend the webinar. So you've probably received emails for this webinar to make sure to remind you to go. So it will usually be a week before or a couple of days before you get one like, hey, you get one when you signed up, and then you get a reminder. And sometimes you even get a last one on the day itself saying, don't forget that you have a webinar here today. That's a separate workflow, and it's a separate workflow you can measure by seeing how many of the people that register to a webinar have also attended the webinar. And finally, maybe the people that have attended a webinar, you want to make sure to nurture them to requesting a consultation. This again is measurable. They're separate workflows, and they all contribute to the same factor, getting people to buy. Now that we've talked about setting a goal, it's important to define who will be added to your workflow. If you start a workflow from scratch, the actions or delays will start straight away. But let's talk about enrolling an audience. There's different kinds of setting up workflows. So if we're starting from scratch, this is usually done for lead nurturing or notifications. So someone does a certain action, they're enrolled, and the workflow starts straight away. So this is usually done for a series of nurturing emails or notifications to the sales rep. Action taken equals start workflow. There's different kind of workflows. So there's also center on a date. So contacts that will start that are centered around a particular date that will be defined by a marketer. So this would be very likely a webinar or an in-person event. So we have the date set, and either so many days before a certain date we want to send something, or X amount of days after a certain date. Any kind of webinar, event, product launch, anything like that, it's not about when someone does a certain action, it's about you centering it around a specific date. And then finally, there's center on a date property. This is a really cool way of making sure that you have recurring things happening. A really basic one would be, I want to send all my contacts an email when it's their birthday. I'm pretty sure we all get them from Bulp.com anyway, so we've all seen this on numerous occasions, but it could also be different date properties. So it's fully up to the date property that you use. If you work with a renewal, I always want to make sure that you have these set. So send an email 3 months before renewal, 2 months, 1 month, but there's tons of other different kinds of date properties that you could use. Now, when we've looked at these, we want to make sure that we also look at creating the content. What do you need to send to help build a relationship with these contacts so that they feel comfortable and that they see value in continuing to engage with you? And when we're looking at content, I always say that the second email you send is by far the hardest, because usually people come to your website or anything and they engage with any kind of offer that you have. So the first email would usually be, hey, here's that piece of content that you requested. People are expecting this email, so they're very likely to open it, to click the link, because this is what they came for. The second email is where you really need to convince people, because this is something you're sending people that should provide value based upon the first thing that you send, but also work towards getting people towards that goal that you have in mind. So if we're talking about spending time, your first email is important. Your second email is the one that catches people and makes sure that they're ready to receive more content from you. There's a couple of questions that you should ask about each email that you create, but specifically the second one. So would I open this email? If I see this come in, would I click this? Don't just make an assessment on people based on your company, because people in your company have a high level of knowledge about the things that you do. Ask your aunt, ask your neighbor, ask an industry professional, ask any of your former clients, just to get different perspectives and viewpoints, because we can so often stare blindly at something that is so obvious to us, but probably not obvious at all to someone that's seeing this for the first time. Is it informative? Am I providing value? I'm going to keep saying the word value until it's understood by everyone that lead nurturing is about proving that you're giving great things away before you ever ask anything. Is it useful? But as well, is my action item clearly stated? There's a thing called the squint test. So if I squint my eyes, is it really obvious in this email where I should go or what they want me to do? Is there one CTA provided in this email that makes it really obvious that this is the point of action? Ideally, the CTA is on the right-hand side of your email, because our brain, because we read from left to right, is wired to go left, right, left, right. Is there just one CTA in my email? Or am I providing 5 different CTAs and it becomes incredibly unclear for people what to do? Would I click it? Would my neighbor click it? Would my aunt click it? Is this relevant to where my audience is in their buyer journey? And this just ties back to those milestones. Is this the right email to be sending in this workflow? Or should this be used at a different workflow? An email could be an absolutely fantastic email with tons of great value, but it could have really low open or click rates just because you're giving it way too early and people are not ready for this email yet. Or vice versa, it's a great email for people that don't know the topic yet, and you're only providing this to people that are already way further in their journey. One of the things you want to do here is map your entire content library in a content audit. So this will help you understand if you have a gap in your content mix, and it will help you evaluate the flow between each content and each stage. This really simply would just say, this is a piece of content that I have, this is the type of content that it is, and this is the stage that I would use it in. This is a great way to see what you have and what you're missing. If we're talking about building out your full buyer's journey, set your goals, set your milestones, and then look at this content audit to see, what do I have and how am I going to tie those people from milestone to milestone? It doesn't require a very complicated worksheet, but just mapping out what you have will give you a much clearer understanding of what you need to make and how to structure it. Now, if we're looking at automation, it would be remiss not to call out personalization tokens. If we look at email deliverability, email clicks, open rates, personalization is key. Don't overdo it. We all get those kind of emails where you see your own name 6 different times in 6 different places, and you just feel like it's a little bit stalky. But making sure that you provide some basic elements of, we know who you are and this email is tailored to you, and we're not just doing an email blast, can really help. If you're doing B2B, including a company name is a great way of showing that you know who you're speaking to. An email with a first name in the subject or a company name in the subject is much more likely to be opened. Don't do this for all of your emails, but the emails that are really crucial, like that second email in your first flow, would be a great time to start using these personalization tokens in a subject line. I just wanted to provide a couple of more examples because I find it gets a little bit more tangible if you see how other people are doing this. So the secret to effective lead nurturing is to collect as much information as you can about your leads and then use it to be relevant and to be interesting. Including call to actions is a great way to collect these types of insights. If you aren't sure about what CTA to include, go back to step 1 and think about the goal of the campaign. The information that we want to get from a lead is directly tied into where we want to get them. If the goal is we want to get someone to sign up for a webinar, well, think about what webinars do I offer? What webinar might be relevant for what people? So what do I need to know about these people in order to get them aimed at the right webinar? Couple of examples. So education, how to hang your art, educate me. I think educate me is a great call to action because it steers away from the classic click, buy more info, anything like that. Start exploring is Airbnb one, and I think this is a prime example of something that gets you excited. It's about building up that feeling of, oh, cool, what else is there to see that you want to have in your emails? And I understand it's a lot easier if you're Airbnb and you're making sure that you're showing pictures of New York, but see, what can I do in my industry that makes it exciting and interesting? If we look at a support one, explore more zaps is a great way. It doesn't have to be tantalizing or exhilarating always, but just seeing what else is there out there. If you're already on the topic is a brilliant way to get people to say, okay, I'm actually really curious, like how are other people setting this up? What's happening there? Make sure that you aim for that interest. And if the interest is there, you've captured the attention and it's up to you to take it from there with your other workflows.
In the chat, Steven, people are asking for concrete examples. So I think thank you for this. This is really valuable. But regarding the personalization in the subject line, there is a specific question from Frederick. Does it impact deliverability regarding spam filters if the first name is in the subject line? Yes or no?
It should. Basically, your email deliverability is often measured by your IP sending domain. So it's the reputation of your IP sending domain, and the most important factors there would be your open rates and your click rates. So yes, of course, certain words, especially in one-to-one emails, are being filtered out. So you want to steer away from the promotion, free, buy now, anything like that. But adding a name has been proven to increase open rates. And increased open rates are good for your IP sending domain reputation. So over time, if you don't use this too much, it's going to help you. If you do the same thing, and if you look at your entire journey and you see that people are getting Steven opened this in email 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to be done with you pretty soon. But using it at key times is going to help you out.
Okay, thanks. Great.
Perfect. I'm just looking at the time, so I will speed up a little bit. But this is my favorite part, right? Creating the steps or making the magic happen. Here are some things to consider when you're building out your automation. How much time will it take for a contact to digest this information before I send them more? I've recently had a client that sent someone a 70-page booklet and then sent them another 20-page booklet 3 days after, and they were very surprised that no one else was opening the second email. Well, I'm not, because I don't know about you, but 70 pages takes me a while to read. So what am I sending them? How long should I wait before I send them something else? And if the first thing you're sending is 70 pages, maybe you should split those 70 pages up so that you have relevant offers along the way. At what point are they ready to meet the goal of the workflow? So what information do I need to send to increasingly get people to the goal of my workflow? How do I provide value that nurtures people step by step? Now, if we get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of things, there's a ton of different actions and stuff that you can do in your workflows. So you have your building blocks, which be your delays. I think most people would be familiar with adding in your delays, make sure that you wait 3 days before the next action is taken. But if then branching logic is so unappreciated. If then branch logic could be based on pretty much anything. So if you're sending out an email with a certain call to action, you add your delay, give people a little bit of time to read into that email, and then maybe you want to do an if-then branch based on if they've clicked your CTA in that email. If they haven't clicked that CTA, they're very likely not ready for the next piece of content. So maybe you branch off and you give them a reminder about the content that you sent, or you send something that is similar. If people have not clicked, but you're providing them with the next thing, they're likely not ready for it. And this is where your if-then branching can really help you out. There's other kinds of actions, creating a task, sending an internal SMS, message, email notification, anything like that. So this would be great, especially if you're working from marketing with sales. If someone's clicked this CTA, if someone's opened the pricing page, create a task for sales to reach out. This is a no-brainer and everyone should have this. Then there's different kinds of marketing actions. So there's sending your emails externally or internally. Well, these are pretty much self-explanatory, but also adding or removing from a static list. You're thinking, why would I want to do this? Well, there's different kinds of reasons why you might want to add someone to a static list. Let's think back on those webinars, for example. Well, maybe I want to add people to a static list if there's a certain webinar I'm doing as a once-off. I'm doing a product launch and I'm getting people to sign up for a webinar for product launch in 2021. I want to be able to see who signed up for a specific webinar at a certain date. By adding people to a static list, I'm going to have that information ready in my portal in a list saying, this is everyone that attended that specific product launch at that time. Then this is basically what your standard flow would look like. A pricing page notification, someone has visited a certain URL, send an internal email to sales to reach out. Now, as well, remember the tokens. They're useful for other things as well, such as sending an informed notification to your team. Personalization tokens are not just useful for external communication, but they could be really useful for internal communication. Instead of, hey, sales rep, this person is ready, how about we make sure that they don't have to go into the full portal? So we send an internal email saying, this is all the information we have, call them. This just saves sales a lot of time. And if we save time on sales reps, they're going to be able to spend that time a lot better. Then there's, on your sales side, there's different kind of actions that you can do as well. So you can create a deal or rotate leads, and from a services side, you can create tickets. This is really useful because maybe you want to automatically create a deal when someone has had a certain action or passed a certain workflow or at their certain stage. When you create a deal is dependent on your business and then your situation. But think about maybe automatic deal creation is going to have that effect on seeing how well am I doing on my deal conversion. This could be really, really useful. As well as rotating leads to make sure that if someone comes in, I want to spread them out through my sales team, or even with if-then logic, if their IP is from this country, I want to rotate the lead over my Spanish sales team, so that we always have the relevant people to the relevant leads.
Steven, good moment to pause here because there's a relevant question from Lotte regarding the customer experience here. If you have multiple workflows up and running like this, how can you avoid that people receive double information if they are involving different workflows?
Yeah, it's a great question. Unfortunately, I don't have the option to share my screen now in the way that I would do in a customer call. But if you look into your workflows, you have suppression lists. So there's different kind of ways to do it. So you can either have a certain list of people that you want to suppress from a workflow altogether. Think about maybe your current customers. You don't want to nurture them to a consultation for something that they already have. So you can say, here's my list, make sure that they never enroll in this workflow. There's also ways of looking at your workflows to say, if they enroll into this workflow, enroll them from all other workflows or workflow A, B, C, or D. So if someone decides that they're ready for a more advanced workflow or an advanced step by making sure that they're going through that content, you want that workflow to say, automatically unenroll them from any of the workflows that were before this in my buyer's journey, so that they always get the content that is relevant for them at that time. I hope that's answered the question.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Awesome. Few more actions to go through. Well, we've looked at this: creating a deal, rotating leads, creating tickets. These are not complex workflows, but they're going to save you a ton of time. There's Academy courses on all of this if you want to really help to build these out fully, but have a play in your portal. This should be pretty self-explanatory. Then finally, actions. There's different things that you can do, and workflows are a brilliant way to feed your CRM, because it allows you to play around with your own properties, to set a new one, to copy, clear, or increase a value. The amount of things that you can do with this is huge. So it could be a number of things. It could be a date property. If someone does step X, I want to set a new property that this is the date they did something. Not all dates for everything are always available. So if you're working with a very specific way of setting things, setting a contact property value on a date, a number, a value, an action could be a really great way to personalize your portal for you. There's also copy and contact property values. So maybe a certain piece of property lives on a contact, but you'd rather see it on a company level. A workflow can do that for you. It can copy a contact property value to the associated company and to make sure that you can organize the data in the way that you want to have it organized. You can also increase contact property values. So for example, amount of time someone's opened in the marketing email, or amount of CTAs clicked, amount of content downloaded. Well, how about you make a property that says total amount of ebook downloads? You create a workflow that says if they've downloaded any of these, increase that value by 1. And this is, you can do a number of things with this. You can set these up for their own workflows. You can use this as a lead scoring system. There's a number of things you can use this for, and really the possibilities are quite endless. So another quick example here is we have our enrollment triggers. So we want to make sure that someone is from France, they have this amount of employees, their role is relevant to us, and we have their phone number. Well, if we have all of this, then maybe this is an MQL for us. This doesn't take into account anything like activity, so I'm not sure if I would fully agree that they are an MQL, but it does mean that they're a good quality leads, and now all we need to do is engage them enough to make sure before we pass them over to sales. Company properties, I'm not going to go through all of these for the sake of time, but you can do very much the same things that you would do from a contact level. You can set, copy, clear, increase, and you can do the same with deals or with tickets. Now, as with everything, testing is essential. So you want to send individual test emails, and you want to make sure that those emails are well received. So in terms of your A/B, if you're A/B testing your emails, for now, if you don't have access to the beta yet, either ask your customer success manager to get you in the beta for A/B workflow emails, or send out a regular A/B test to understand which variation is performing better. Now, also, just put yourself through the workflow. I really strongly recommend this, or put a colleague or a partner or anyone, just to see how does it feel when you're receiving these emails, and how much more time would I want, or is there any kind of changes that I would make. Just receiving something is going to give you a lot more insight into what's working than when you're building it out, because it can start to feel a little bit static in terms of delays if you're not actually experiencing them. Now, final part, defining the end, our so what moment. you have your goal, you have contacts that meet them, they're ready to be handed over to sales. What do you do if they don't meet the goal? What do you do with contacts that aren't ready? Well, you can send them more information, you can let them be, and you can circle back with a re-engagement campaign. Those are really kind of your two options, but there's also a time to say goodbye. So if someone just isn't opening any of your emails anymore, it's time for a breakup email. A breakup email can be an opportunity to gather insights and see what you need to improve about your strategy. So getting feedback here, not everyone's going to fill this out, but if you can get any kind of feedback from a couple of people why they were no longer engaged, that's going to help you optimize your workflow so that you get less engaged people. You're always going to have you're never going to get a 100% score, but making sure you learn from people that fall out of your workflow logic is the best way to improve them. Now, I'm wary of time, so the last thing I want to go through is a couple of quick nurturing examples because I'm sure everyone would love to see these. One is a reminder workflow. If taxes aren't completed and this is around a certain date, I want to make sure that I send a reminder email. This is something that I could use myself to make sure that I remind to do my own taxes. I have a date, I have a property that says something hasn't been done yet, I have something set to happen when all of this is true. If this is the date and this hasn't happened, send me that email as a reminder. You can even continue this with your if-then logic to say, well, check 5 days later. I guess 5 days later would be too late for doing your taxes in this instance. But you can do a reminder with your if-then branch, like if this has been done at that date, then send me an email saying good job, and if not, bad job. If you're doing any kind of e-commerce, abandoned carts or conversion nurture is so important. Most people don't buy the first time they put something in their cart. So just by being able to send an email that someone has filled out a registration form, added something to their cart, anything like that, sending a follow-up email with, are you still interested? Maybe even providing a discount is a great way because these people were close to purchasing but didn't. So it would be a shame to not send them anything because they're very likely to purchase. Last one that I'm going to go through is new customer nurture. So this is your typical start of your lead nurturing. This is what it properly looks like. Someone is a new customer. I want to send them my first email. Hey, congratulations on being a customer. And maybe start to use this kind of way of teaching people how to use the tools. HubSpot does this a lot. So we'll be sending out a lot of things like, this is our Academy course. This is our training for the tools that you've purchased. And it helps you retain customers. I've kind of flown through that last part a little bit because I wanted to make sure there's a couple of minutes to go through any kind of last questions that we have.
Yes, thanks for that. There are indeed some final questions. Thank you, everybody, for asking those. Let's dive in. For example, Frederick again, is feedback best as open text or better as a survey type method? Do you have any best practice advice on that, Steven?
Yeah, it depends on your scale. I think if you can actually have a conversation with someone and you're not sending this out en masse in thousands, it's really useful to do qualitative information. So if you do this open, you can make sure that you learn about the actual insights and you're going to get information that you would never be able to get in quantitative. However, quantitative gives you much more reliable data. So if we're sending out a survey and we're seeing everyone saying the delays were too short, that's much more valuable than one person saying it. The best thing you can do is do a combination of both. If you're sending out in scale, do your surveys for your quantitative, but also make sure that you're reaching out to people. Maybe include something in your quantitative research saying, would it be okay if we send you an email for a further conversation? That way you can combine both types of data to get anything that you might have missed in your survey, but also something that's directly actionable based on numbers.
And another additional question, embedded tools for that. I'm thinking Service Hub, of course, of HubSpot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Service Hub is the go-to place for that. So there's 3 different kinds of surveys. So there's your NPS, your CSAT, and your CES. These are the kind of things that you want to use for that ideally. If you're very creative and you have a lot of time, you might be able to build this out with your marketing emails, but I really wouldn't recommend it.
There were some questions in the beginning also around some best practices or examples on lead scoring based on best practices. Is it the score 1 to 100, or what should you advise? 1 to 100, right?
I advise 1 to 100. Yeah. It's gonna make it so much more insightful about what score someone needs to reach in order for them to qualify for a next stage. What I see often is people start attributing scores to it, and then they add new scores, and at some point they kind of lose track of what a good score is. So if you go from 0 to 100, you could say at 50 they're an MQL, or at 70 in our case. And we can also directly disqualify someone, because maybe if they filled out they're a student, give them minus 100 and they will never qualify ever.
And another question from Thomas. What are good filters to eventually decide, do a cleanup regarding all your contacts who won't become qualified, and can this be automated via a smart list? Because you were explaining smart list, static list a little bit. Yeah, so absolutely. What I would do is look at certain filters like last marketing email open date versus last marketing email sent date. So if we look at last marketing email sent date is somewhere in the last year, that means we've sent them an email this year. If we see that last marketing open date is not in this year, that means they haven't opened a single email this year. It could be really good to initially use a list like that for a final bugger off campaign. So making sure that you send one final email to these people saying, hey, are you still interested? And if not, that's the time to see they're still in that list. We've emailed them. They still haven't opened this, clean this up. If they have opened this, they're no longer in that list. So you automatically know that they're more relevant. Yeah, makes sense. All right. Another question, if you can add smileys to the email. Yeah, that's available in the Service Hub, right? So I think there's here some good exploration possibilities for that great additional hub in the CRM platform of HubSpot. Again, what we said, we will share the recording of this webinar and slides. But Steven also mentioned, feel free to reach out to him via LinkedIn or your own customer success manager, if it's not Steven, of course, to make sure that you will make the right progress on lead nurturing and marketing automation. I think this was a very valuable hour. For now, I would like to thank everybody for joining, and especially Steven for all your insights and knowledge you shared with us today. Thank you for having me, Thijs. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And thank you so much for attending. Yes. All right, guys. Bye-bye.